after the results of the Week 17 1 o'clock window, we know one thing's for a fact for the Cleveland Browns. No matter what happens the rest of the NFL regular season, the Cleveland Browns will be the 5 seed. Now, we also know the Baltimore Ravens will be the 1 seed. What we don't know, or at least we have a good idea of also knowing that Kansas City is likely going to be the 3 seed. There is a chance that Kansas City drops their next 2. Well, not their next 2. They drop a game versus the Cincinnati Bengals, which is close right now as we're recording this video, which is possible. But then they would also have to drop a game, the Easton Stick in the Chargers in order. And also the Broncos have to win out. So we'll see what happens here. It looks like the Broncos are going to win this game. So there is a small chance that the 3 seed changes, but we know who the 1 seed is for a fact. We know who the 5 seed is going to be for a fact. Everything else in the AFC playoff picture is absolutely 1000% in flux. A little bit of flex with the 3 seed. The 2 seed is completely up in the air right now. The 7 seed is up in the air. And so is the 6 seed is up in the air because there's that log jam of teams with 8-9 wins right now. And going into week 18, there will be a bunch of teams with 10 wins. Well, with 9 wins that could potentially get there. So what we want to do today is go in the playoff machine, see who the Browns could play at that 4 seed matchup, because that'll be whoever wins the AFC South more than likely. There's also a chance that Denver wins the AFC West, and that would mean that Kansas City would be like the 6 or 7 seed, potentially out, and Denver would be the 4 seed. But right now, 98% chance that 98% chance that the Browns are playing whoever wins the AFC South. That is pretty likely at this point. So what can happen the rest of the way to determine who the Browns play? Well, first we have these 2 games which are still going on. Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. If Pittsburgh and Cincinnati both win, and then week 18 goes as follows. The Steelers beat the Ravens, the Browns beat the Bengals. In the AFC North, actually, we're just going to stay there. Then this is what the playoff outcome would look like. The Steelers would make it in over the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if the Bengals win and the Steelers win, still kind of ends up the same here, right? If they both win out, they both don't automatically make it unless maybe the Colts win. Nope, the Colts, so they're done. They're pretty much done. What they would have to have happen, well, what the AFC South, I mean, not the AFC, what the AFC North would need to have happen to have all of the teams make the playoffs, which is still possible. All teams could make the playoffs. Is for Cincinnati to finish their game and beat Kansas City this week, Cincinnati to beat the Browns next week, Pittsburgh to beat the Seahawks, and Pittsburgh to beat the Baltimore Ravens. Also, they would need the Jacksonville Jaguars to lose. So if the Jaguars lose to the Titans, then it doesn't matter who wins this game, because that will just decide who wins the division. And the AFC North will have the 6 and the 7 seed. Think about that. Think about that. It's not crazy to think it can happen right now. The Steelers are up on the Seahawks. I believe the Bengals are either up or close to up on the Kansas City Chiefs. So if those 2 hold, then Pittsburgh and Cincinnati both win, which is likely because the Browns and the Ravens both have their playoff positioning locked in. What happens if one of these games tie? Yeah, you can't tie. You got to win. Got to win. So, yeah, you can't tie. Can't tie. Ironically enough, also another game that kind of affects the Browns. This is going to be for week 1 seeding. Well, not week 1, playoff wildcard seeding, because if Buffalo wins, you would also need the Miami Dolphins to win, I believe, because then Buffalo gets tied there, and then you get the Pittsburgh win. Yeah, so you would need a Buffalo loss, a Pittsburgh win, a Cincinnati win, and a Tennessee win in order for all AFC North teams to make it. It's not the craziest scenario I've ever heard of. All of the games that are happening, you can see going that way, because the Jacksonville Jaguars likely having a backup quarterback. What happens if this game ties? So this game ties. Okay, so also another thing to note, if we're going back to the Browns playoff picture, let's just assume Baltimore and Cleveland went out. If we go back to the playoff picture, the Jaguars, if they win, they're in. right? If they win, they're the 4 seed. They win the division. That's it. They have to play the Titans. The Titans aren't the toughest team in the AFC South. I believe they're the last place team. So this is something that they should accomplish. I know that they're probably not going to have Trevor Lawrence, but I think they'll be fine in that game. So if the Jaguars win, and if I'm a Browns fan, I think this is what you want to happen, right? You want to play the Jaguars. That's the matchup you feel best about, and you want to have the best matchup possible in the playoffs if you're the Cleveland Browns. So you want to play the Jaguars. If you're going to have to play on the road, you get them if they win, and then the winner of this game will get the 6th seed. Now, here's a interesting scenario, right? Because let's say Buffalo beats Miami. Now, if Buffalo beats Miami next week, which this will be the last game of the regular season, I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Sunday night game. So if Buffalo and Miami are both going to be in the playoffs, they have a high likelihood of both making the playoffs. Let's go to the New York Times tracker right now. You can see with all the outcomes to today's game, the Browns will 100% be in the wild card, right? So if we switch this up and try to get to, it's going to ask me for the free trial finally. All right, if we switch this up and get to Buffalo's likely going to make the playoffs, right? Whether they win or lose next week versus Miami. If they win, they're 100% in and they win the division. If they lose, they're likely going to make the playoffs. So the Buffalo Bills are likely to make the playoffs at this point. So it's not going to determine who makes the playoffs or not this game. But what it will determine is, hey, if Miami wins, they're the 2 seed. If Buffalo wins, they're the 2 seed and Miami is the 6 seed. If Miami wins, Buffalo is the 7th seed and Miami is a 2 seed. Now, this is important that the Browns are the 5 seed because the way that Buffalo is playing and the way that some of these division winners have played in the AFC indicates to me that if this is the wild card lineup or if this is the wild card lineup, right? If you have it Miami, Cleveland, Houston, or Houston, Cleveland, Buffalo. If those are the 3 wild card teams, any combination of those 4 teams, if those are the 3 wild card teams, that's very good for the Cleveland Browns because that means your chances of home field go up significantly, right? I would say outside of Buffalo and Miami, who are playing similar level football right now, I know some people are down on Miami because they got blown out by Baltimore, but Buffalo probably would have gotten blown out by Baltimore too. So if Buffalo wins that game, then you get Buffalo, Houston. It's a little bit of a more lopsided matchup. I would take Buffalo in that, but let's say Buffalo loses this game because they don't sweep the Miami Dolphins this year, right? Because they already beat them earlier. It's hard to sweep a team. Let's say Miami wins that game. Then you get this 2-7 matchup, Miami versus Buffalo. That's something I can't see Buffalo winning in a rematch 1 week later. If Buffalo wins, that means the 7th seed wins. If Houston wins, that means the 6th seed wins, right? Over Kansas City, which I can see CJ Stroud putting together an offensive performance that can get him to the 2nd round. And if Cleveland wins, obviously the 5 seed wins. Why is that important? Well, if all 3 of these upsets happen, the Cleveland Browns effectively become the 2 seed. Because then that means that the Browns will host the 2nd round game. And if the Baltimore Ravens get upset, the Browns will host the AFC Championship game. The Browns will effectively be the 2 seed in the NFL playoffs. So a lot of interesting ways that this can line up. And again, if you get this lineup right here, 7-6-5 with Cleveland, Houston, and Buffalo, some combination of these 3 teams at the 5, 6, and 7 spot, that's very good for Cleveland because what could happen then is Buffalo, if you get all 3 upsets, let's say Buffalo beats Miami, then Buffalo has to play Baltimore in the 2nd round. It's a tough matchup for Baltimore as well. And then you would get to play Houston in the 2nd round. That's going to be a tough matchup, CJ Stroud, but you would have it at home. Or you can get a version of this where Buffalo beats Miami, Buffalo plays Baltimore in the 2nd round, and you get Kansas City. You like your matchup against Kansas City, especially for a team that's offenses has been up and down, but mainly up since Joe Flacco has joined the team. So there's a lot of interesting ways that this can break down for the Cleveland Browns and who they play. I think if I'm being 100% honest here, this is what I would want to have happen if I'm the Cleveland Browns. I would want it so that Baltimore's the 1 seed, Buffalo's the 7th seed, Houston's the 6th seed, and Cleveland's the 5 seed, because I think that gives you the best chance of getting a triple upset wild card weekend and having the Browns basically be reseeded to that 2nd seed spot in the AFC playoffs. Think that would be the most fortunate, and then you would get a home game as well. We know how good this defense plays at home. I do want to see this Browns team get to play at home because I think this defense is incredible, especially when they're playing big games at home. I want to see them have that. And if you could get a 2nd round game at home, that means you can have a chance to get to the AFC Championship game and play Baltimore. Or if you're fortunate and there's an upset against Baltimore, you can get another home game at the AFC Championship. So the 5 seed's actually really important that the Browns lock that up as early as they did. And again, nothing that can happen next week changes that. The only thing that could change it is if Cleveland loses versus Cincinnati, or if both of these teams lose, right? Then Pittsburgh's the 7th seed, and you just feel much worse about Pittsburgh's chance to upset Miami, right? But if Baltimore wins and it's Cincinnati versus Miami, you feel kind of okay about that. If Cleveland wins and that happens, and then this could change a whole bunch of different ways. But, you know, if you get this alignment, I do think this is the most fortunate alignment you can get. Now, with the Browns not having to play for much on Sunday, who will play for the Cleveland Browns? Well, I took a stab at this just based on how Kevin likes to get down, who's played in some of these meaningless Week 18 games before, and what Kevin's philosophy seems to be on this. And I know a lot of people are just assuming they're going to bench all their starters. There's a lot of logistical reasons why they simply can't do that, and it does look like the Steelers are going to beat the Seahawks here. But with 2 minutes left, Pittsburgh's up 10. But a lot of people do think that the Browns is going to simply rest every starter. You can't do that because you already have guys who are going to miss the game because of injury. And then you only have, 53 guys on the roster that you can play. You can't bench 22 of 53 people. Like, that's almost half the roster. You would barely be able to field a special teams unit. And then there's an issue that you can get people hurt, a lot of your backups hurt, by not having people in the right position. Because how would you feel if you did bench all the starters, right? But there's a guy like Shelby Harris, who is a critical piece of this team, that gets hurt because he's playing out of position because you only have 30 people on the active roster. Or maybe it's somebody who's not critical right now, but could become critical if there is an injury in Cam Mitchell. You don't want to destroy your depth to protect your starters. You want to have a good mix of it. So you will have some starters playing. Now, anybody who's been dealing with anything will not play in this game for the most part. So I don't think Joe Flacco is going to play. I don't think Joe Bitonio is going to play. I don't think Ethan Posic's going to play. I don't think Elijah Moore is going to play. 100% Elijah Moore is not playing. Amari Cooper, 100% not playing. Denzel Ward has a history of small tissue injuries. He's not going to play. And concussions. Greg Newsome, probably not going to play for similar reasons to Denzel Ward. JOK, probably not going to play. Similar reasons to Denzel Ward. Dustin Hopkins, likely not going to play. I do see a world where Dustin feels like he can play. You do throw him out there so he can kick a few to see if he's comfortable with it. But he is a vet, so you might just go with his word on it through practice. But everybody else, I think, will play. I think you're going to get Za'Darius. I think you're going to get Miles. I think you're going to get Dalvin. I think you're going to get most of the defensive guys, right? You're going to get probably Sione Takitaki. You're going to get, I think JOK's might play. JOK, if you don't get JOK, it'll be Tony Fields. You're going to get Martin Emerson, and then you're going to get Cam Mitchell in this game, and then all the safeties that have been playing so far. You're going to play all those guys. And then on the other side of the ball, you're going to have to play backup offensive lineman. Maybe Wyatt Teller stays in there because he's not dealing with anything. And then backup wide receivers. David Njoku might play, might not. They'll be 50-50 on it because he's not really dealing with anything right now, but you don't want him to get hurt, and you do have a backup who could fill fine. So maybe Jordan Atkins is in there. So maybe add David Njoku to that list. But all the running backs, they're pretty disposable. They'll probably play. And then PJ Walker with the backup being Kyle Trask is the backup for that game. He might start. I don't know. I don't care. But that's probably what the Browns are going to roll in there. Now, a lot of people will ask, why in the world would Myles Garrett play in that game? It's kind of one of these things where Myles likes to play these last games of the year, and he likes to play it off principle. He believes he's the leader of this team, and he is the leader of this team, especially the defense. And to him, the leader of the team does not sit out games when he can play. It's a similar thing that Ray Lewis used to do in Baltimore. Ray Lewis would always play in these games when they had an opportunity to kind of rest. So Myles is probably going to play a little bit. Now, he'll be under a restricted stat count. He's also probably playing for his own defensive player of the year candidacy. You only get so many years where you'll be a true candidate to win that award. So he'll probably want to do whatever he can do to lock that up. And if you're Myles, this is a perfect opportunity. You're playing against a team, so you could probably see Myles in the first half of this game. A little bit of Obo Okoronkwo just to make sure he's healthy enough to go for the wild card game. Maybe they work in some guys like Grant Delpit, but I doubt it. It's going to be kind of like if you look at the preseason games and you see who they start, imagine that plus maybe some Myles Garrett. Right. If you go to the week 3 preseason game, you saw Zadarius out there. You saw Dalvin out there. You saw JOK and these guys out there, but you didn't see certain guys like Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson. So you can sub Deshaun for Joe Flacco and you can see where this is all going. Right. They're probably going to play those guys. And that makes sense here. I don't think you would bench your third string tackles that are already starting for you. You can't really afford to. You have nobody else to go to. And you do want a backup quarterback to be healthy next week versus whoever. Again, you cannot sacrifice your backup depth in order to just protect your starters. You have to have a mix of both out there. And hopefully it's a clean game and the Browns play smart and nobody gets injured, knock on wood. But that's why I think the game plan will be for next week. You'll see some starters here. You'll see some starters there. I think defensively, you'll see most of the starters. Offensively, not going to see that many skilled players, and probably any offensive lineman or offensive player has been dealing with anything. We know Joe Bitonio's been dealing with back pain. We know Ethan Posick has been dealing with, I think it was a shoulder. And then Wyatt Teller's been fine. All these other guys have been fine. So that's what I think they're going to go to. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Interesting week of football. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.